Of course, we have removed the minority interest stake. It looks more or less that the numbers seem to be in line, not a beat exactly, but in line with our own expectations. In terms of other numbers, the net sales, that's minusing the excise duty, has come in at 18,285 crore rupees versus a poll of 18,545 crore rupees. I think minorly disappointing, really, just about 300 crore rupees off. But I think it's safe to say that it's in line with our own expectations. It's posted in a growth of close to about 26 to 27%. On the EBITDA front, it's come in at 5,921 crore rupees. I think that's a very good number versus 4,713 crore rupees. Margins at 32.4% versus 32.6%. A bit of a compression. That's something as well that's a bit surprising, because given the way LME prices have moved up and the way Vedanta has actually coincided their capacity expansion with the way LME prices have been moving, this now I think comes a bit surprising. But then of course we did have all of those shutdowns in the power unit. The iron ore business as well was hit, so perhaps we may be seeing some one-offs over there. The net profit seems to be as well a bit a bit below analyst expectations at 1,525 crore rupees. Again, just to remind our viewers, this is the net profits attributable to the owners of the business versus 754 crore rupees. We'll just wait by and see segmentally which are the sectors that have performed, but in all probability money is on aluminium as well as zinc. Those are the two businesses that most on the street believe is something that has led the growth for Vedanta.
Okay, Bobina, just explain that point which you were mentioning right at the beginning when you were explaining the profit figure to me.
Well, 1,525 crore rupees is the profits attributable to the owners. So we haven't essentially taken the minority interest or the share of the associates in the business. So net profits attributable to the owners of the company, that's what 1,525 crore
That's the right way of looking at it, because ultimately if I'm looking at consolidated profit, I need to put all the subsidiaries and all the businesses together and arrive at that number.
Well, essentially, minority interest is something that, is not exactly owned by the company. You're looking at the outsider's share in the subsidiaries that you own. So, for example, in HZL, there is a certain percentage that Vedanta owns, and then there's a certain percentage that the government and other shareholders own. So, prima facie, we want to look at what is Vedanta earning out of its stake in its subsidiaries, and hence, essentially, minority interest removes that, that percentage of the profits and leaves you with what exactly comes in the hands of Vedanta. On the books, that's 1,525 crores.
So what you're saying, Mubina, is that if I look at what other investments they've done, which are not part of the subsidiaries, the profit number will look differently, but the correct profit number which analysts would rely on would be this number of 1,500 crores.
Exactly. But even though, mind you, the numbers are not starkingly different. Yes, there is of course a difference, but not starkingly different. But yes, to understand it, that's what this 1,525 crore rupees, it is actually the profits that do belong to Vedanta Limited, excluding the profits that HZL, that Balco, etc., which is government owned, which is owned by other shareholders. That profit is excluded from this profit of 1,525.
Ultimately, you're paying for the operating profit, the cash flow and the predictability, and on that account it's 1,500 crore what they've done. The stock reaction, however, is strong because of the debt component. A lot has changed for Vedanta. Also for Vedanta, and Mubina, if you're there, this is at least my understanding of Vedanta, that bulk of the capex is behind them. Large capacities would start kicking in now. Product prices have stabilized, and after this entire Kane acquisition, the earnings visibility would be very decent.
Well, yes, exactly. And Vedanta has time and again talked about the bullishness that they have towards the aluminium segment. Of course, recently they've also been talking about the oil and gas segment. But yes, for the aluminium business in particular, especially the ramp up we have been seeing in the Jharsuguda plant, in the plants that are owned by Balco, they have coincided it with the aluminium, the aluminium LME prices. Additionally, I also want to mark down one, important thing is that they have reduced their gross debt by 9,000 crore rupees in the last 4 months. So I think that as well is something that is, perhaps encouraging the street quite a bit. 9,000 crore rupees of gross debt has been reduced by Vedanta in just the last 4 months. So that is something as well, I think, that perhaps is worth noting for Vedanta.